The August WASDA report put U.S. corn at record highs, but weather and disease concerns are already cutting yield hopes. Soybeans face the same pressure. Exports to China remain stalled, and wheat and oilseeds are being hit by shifting global supply. I'm Johanna Bota, and here to break it all down is Bertrand Oesterle, StoneX's VP of Clearing and Execution Sales. Welcome back, Bertrand. Nice to have you. So let's start with the August WASDA report, which gave us a record high U.S. corn yield estimate of 188.8 bushels per acre. So why are we then all of a sudden hearing of lesser yield estimates?
So very simply, the weather has changed slightly in the US. We're at the end of the growing season. We're nearing harvest time, but the weather's been less favorable in the US. It's been dry in some areas. There's some disease concern like rust disease in some areas. And therefore, the estimates of yields have slightly come down in people's mind over the past 3-4 weeks. So if we look at corn, the USDA had in August 188.8, and what analysts have been saying is that when normally the USDA comes in with a very high figure in August, they have a tendency to revise that figure down over the months all the way to January. So for September, people are estimating that maybe those yields are going to be more in the 184, 185 bushel per acre mark rather than 188.8. And that's slightly showing in the crop condition figures we had from the USDA yesterday evening. It's 69% good to excellent. We've lost 2% in good to excellent rating compared to the previous week. 69% is still very good, but it is a drop because there are those weather and disease concerns.
And is this the same thing for U.S. soybean?
Yes, it is similarly affecting soybean. So soybean, the USDA came in with 53.3 bushel per acre estimate in August. People are now talking more of a 52 to 53 bushel per acre range. And this is very much showing in the crop conditions we had yesterday from the USDA. We've lost 4% in a week, which is a lot, and we're 65% good to excellent. Again, it's still a very good figure, but there is definitely an impact from the weather.
And last week's, I remember talking about concerns over exports to China. Is there any update on that?
So it is still a major issue for US exporters. We had 3 days of talks between China and the US over the past week, and those talks concluding in nothing. There's no deal, there's no agreement. It is still the same story. There's no progress from that front. On the contrary, we've got China, which is now talking of potentially releasing some of its own soybean reserves. They are talking of 3 to 5 million tons to release onto its own domestic market. So that means that China is not anywhere near preparing to buy US soybean. So in a context where last year 75% of the US exports in soybean to China occurred from September to January, if we have no sign of China being there, it is quite still a worry. And when we look at the exports, they're currently 1% behind the pace required to get to the USDA annual figure in soybean, and in corn they're currently at pace. So it's a concern. Exports elsewhere have been good, but China is still very much missing. And
you said September to January, so time is starting to run out.
Exactly. The window of opportunity is basically getting shorter and shorter, and it's disappearing.
So let's stay on oilseeds then. Are there any new developments in rapeseed or canola?
So in rapeseed, there's been quite a bit of information coming out over the past week. One bit is about Ukraine. So Ukraine has finished its harvest. The harvest initially was thought to be below 3 million tons. It was a little bit of a concern. As the harvest is being counted in Ukraine, that figure is improving and getting bigger. So the Agricultural Ministry is telling us it is 3.19 million tons. But the surprise this week was the 10% export tax being signed by President Zelensky, exactly. So it's a story that's been in the background for over a month. The government had put a 10% tax to the parliament. The parliament had voted against it. The government had put it again. The parliament voted for it. The grain union said the president should veto it, and in the end, Zelensky passed it. Then when we look at Europe, the estimates are still around the 18.8 billion tons to 20 plus million tons. That range of estimates has slightly improved compared to last week, we had a low of 18.5, we're now 18.8. And when we look at the rest of the rapeseed or canola world, we had a StatScan report out of Canada where they're saying that the crop is 19.937 million tons. So it was slightly below the 20.3 range of estimates we had pre-report, but it's still better than last year. And when we look at Australia, we had an Abaris report also this week that shows 6.4 million tons of potential output. That figure is about 1% better than last year, and it was above the pool of estimates around the 5.9 mark. So we've had some better figures in that sense. We had spoken last week of rapeseed being in a 470, 475 range on November. That range was broken down with all those bits of information coming in. We went down to 460, and we're slightly starting to attempt to regain the 470 mark because of that 10% export tax in Ukraine, which basically gives the feeling to the market that maybe some demand is going to go back within the EU rather than looking at an export market that is now slightly more expensive out of Ukraine.
I see. And if we move on to wheat now, Paris milling wheat has come under pressure. It's actually hitting consecutive new contract lows on Euronext. So how do you explain that?
So Euronext has been the shocker of the week.
Okay.
And basically, when we look at it, we had one Argus report coming over the past week saying that the French ending stocks would be around 4 million tons, which is a 20-year high. So it confirms that France has had a good crop, but that good crop is not getting enough export momentum, and therefore there's more going into the stocks.
Yeah.
So that started to pressure Paris wheat. At the same time, we've had Argus putting the Russian estimates for 25-26 at 86.1 million tons. That goes in line with what we had seen from ICAR and Sovecon. So Sovecon, for example, is still at 85.4 million tons, but they've upped their export estimates from 43.3 to 43.7, which again puts pressure. At a time when we're hearing from the physical market that Russian prices are a bit more competitive than they were a few weeks ago, they're lower. So on that basis, Paris had a lot of pressure. And September, which before we had the fund roll, our perma bears were saying, you'll see September would go to 180. Yesterday we touched 182.5. We're very close to that level. There's that front board pressure, and that pressure has gone into December, and December has made, as you said, consecutive contract lows, with hitting a 190 contract low yesterday. That's a disastrous figure for European farmers. It's some 30 euros below cost of production in Western Europe, and it is not a figure that farmers want to see on the board. Now, when we look at the open interest, it is not just an elephant in the room, it's the mammoth in the room. Okay. We've seen the OI in December growing to a massive 400,000 lots plus. Yeah. To put it into perspective, that's 20 million tons for one single expiry. It's huge. And we estimate that about half of it is the spec short. And when we look at March, that OI is also rising. It's over 107,000 lots. And we also estimate that about half of it is the spec short. So again, a lot of pressure on Paris wheat at present. And people are a bit dismayed and trying to find out what will stop the bleeding on the downside.
And where does Ukraine fall in all of this?
So Ukraine, the harvest is finished. The exports are about the production is about 21.9 million tons. So again, as it is counted, that figure is getting a little bit bigger. And the Grain Union is saying that they hope to see better exports out of Ukraine for the end of this month and next month. So again, a little bit more pressure from Ukraine as well.
Okay, and are there any updates outside of Euronext?
So we've got some developments in wheat which are interesting, one of which is Russia and China. So Russia is attempting to create a trade deal with China to sell to China some of its winter wheat. And that's an interesting point to discuss, because we've got China, which had some heat issues in its wheat development a few months ago. We're still uncertain as to how much China may want to import. But if China agrees to import Russian wheat, then it could take away some of that massive 43.7 million ton export figure from Russia by diverting some of that supply to China. So if we say 3 to 4 million tons could potentially go to China, then it takes away some of that competition. It could be an important element for Eastern Europeans or French exporters, and it could provide some support to Euronext eventually. Yeah. Outside of this, we've had some updates from Argentina, Canada, and Australia. So for Argentina, we know the crop is fully planted. It has benefited from good recent rain, so everything's going well there. Then for Canada, we had a StatsCan report that came in at production estimate of about 35.5 million tons, so it's in line with expectation. And then for Australia, we have a ABARES report that came out also over the past week with a 33.8 million ton production estimate.
And one last thing before we let you go, is there anything that we should be keeping an eye on?
So there's a few things which are interesting, either for the bull side or for the bear side. I'm going to start with the bull side. There's a bit more to mention than in previous reports that we've made. So some people are starting to think that we might get to a consolidation phase. And why? Because they see that the September contract on Euronext Paris wheat is getting out of the board on the 10th of September with the delivery certificates due on the 8th. So in a way, that could take some of that front month pressure away, and we'll see how December reacts, if it's able to consolidate or not. Then shortly after, so not Friday this week, but Friday next week on the 12th of September, we've got this USDA report where everyone will be looking at whether or not indeed the USDA will reduce the corn yields from 188.8 bushel per acre in the US to 184, 185, and similarly 53.3, actually 53.6 in soybean to anywhere 52 to 53. So that's two elements that could consolidate, potentially provide some bullishness. On top of it, we've got the harvest, which is coming to an end in wheat. The harvest is going to start in corn and soybean eventually, but we're getting to a point where harvest pressure is winding down, and also at a point where people are thinking about the consumer cycle, that should be starting to show the tip of its nose. And from now to December, we should see more consumer interest. The other thing which is interesting is we're starting to again start about La Niña. So La Niña is the weather pattern. The World Weather Organization is saying that there's a 55% risk of La Niña reoccurring from September. It's a small percentage, but we're going to have to watch out what impact it's going to have weather-wise on crops worldwide. And generally speaking, when we talk about La Niña, we talk of a wetter southern Canadian, northern US area, a drier mid to southern US area, a wetter northern Brazilian area, but a drier southern Brazil, Argentine.
Frozen level.
Area. Exactly.
Wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. Okay.
Absolutely. And then also it could be a wetter area for Western Europe. And on the bear side, there's two elements that we're going to have to watch out for. It's again that Chinese story. Is China going to come and buy US soybean or not? And the other bit, which is quite important, is the euro dollar. So a lot of people in the spec industry still think that Trump will eventually get his way. He's been criticizing the Fed again and again, asking for a rate cut. If he gets a rate cut, that would be negative US dollar, which could support Chicago, but it is also meaning that it would be supporting a euro dollar, and that's where the specs frighten us, because they say that they think that eventually euro dollar could rally to 125, if not 140. We're currently around the 117 mark, and we know that the euro dollar has been one of the main pain elements for European farmers and exporters. So we're going to have to watch out for that potential euro dollar movement and how our participants will be able to hedge.
All right. Thank you, Bertrand, for all that information. And thank you for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.